Let's talk about tourism and hospitality. It is so much more than just vacations, right? It's this absolute global powerhouse. It's a critical engine for economies all over the world, creating jobs, pushing for new infrastructure, and even helping to pull people out of poverty. It is a massive, deeply interconnected sector that touches billions of lives.
And then, the world just stopped. The COVID-19 pandemic brought that entire engine to a screeching halt, and it really laid bare just how fragile the whole thing can be. All of a sudden, the need for smart, effective government policies wasn't just some academic idea. It was about survival for countless businesses and all the people who rely on them.
So this crisis brought up a really important question. When governments have to make these massive, industry-saving decisions, where do they get their information? You'd think, well, from academic research, right? From decades of studies by experts. So a team of researchers decided to actually check to see how helpful all that research really is. And what they found was a shocking, massive gap.
And when I say they dug in, I mean they went big. They didn't just skim a few papers. No, they did a huge review of 10 of the top tourism journals over a full decade. They ended up with, get this, 12,269 articles. That is a mountain of scientific work.
Okay, so you've got this mountain of research. But here's the million-dollar question, right? Out of all those thousands and thousands of studies, how many actually gave a policymaker a complete, usable roadmap? You know, how many actually connected the dots and said, okay, here's the problem, here's how you should step in, and here are the exact tools you should use to fix it? Just take a guess.
The answer? Less than 1%. That's right, 0.93%. Out of over 12,000 articles, only 114 gave what the researchers considered complete policy advice. This isn't just a little gap. It's a massive canyon between the world of academia and the real-world needs of policymakers. So the obvious next question is, why?
To figure out why this gap is so huge, the researchers used this super smart but really simple framework. They checked each study for 3 key ingredients that make up complete policy advice: the why, the how, and the what.
It's pretty straightforward, really. Think of it like a checklist. For any piece of advice to be truly complete, it has to answer 3 questions. First, the why. What's the core reason the government even needs to get involved? Second, the how. What role should the government play here? Should it be a regulator, an educator? Should it just offer incentives? And third, the what. What specific tools, we're talking laws, taxes, partnerships, what should actually be used to get the job done? You need all 3 for it to count as complete advice.
And just to make sure we're all on the same page, when we say public policy, this is what we're talking about. It's the whole set of rules, both the written ones and the unwritten ones, that guide how everybody in the industry operates, from the biggest hotel chains down to the local tour guides. It's basically the rules of the game.
All right, so now that we have the framework, let's dive into what they actually found. When the research did give a reason for why a policy was needed, what was the most common one? And wow, the results here are, well, they're not even close. The #1 reason, by a long shot, that researchers gave for needing a policy was market failure. This means researchers are mostly telling policymakers they need to step in when the free market just isn't working efficiently on its own.
So what this tells us is that, for the most part, academics see policy as a tool to fix economic problems. You know, things like managing competition between businesses or figuring out how to allocate resources. It's a very traditional economics first point of view.
But okay, look at what's not there. This is huge. Out of thousands and thousands of articles, just only four, suggested using policy to tackle a lack of diversity. 4. And every single one of them was only about gender. This points to a massive blind spot in the research when it comes to using policy for really important social issues like inclusion.
Okay, so that covers the why. But what about the how and the what? When researchers do suggest what to do, what does that advice usually look like?
So for the how should government step in? Well, the data here is just crystal clear. The top recommendation, and it's not even a competition, is to provide incentives. That means researchers are most often telling governments to encourage certain behaviors, maybe by offering tax breaks for sustainable hotels or giving out grants for new tourism projects. It's a very direct, hands-on role.
Now for the what, the actual tools of the trade. Here, researchers seem to get that tourism is a complicated beast. The most common suggestion isn't one single magic fix, but a hybrid plan.
This means they often recommend combining a bunch of different tools, a mix of new laws, some financial incentives, and public-private partnerships to attack a problem from all sides.
And here's a perfect example of what that looks like in the real world. A study from 2015 didn't just say, do this one thing. Instead, it recommended that the Taiwanese government roll out long-term strategic plans. That's a classic hybrid approach that involves a whole bunch of coordinated actions to lift up the entire industry.
Okay, but this is where things get really interesting. Because policy isn't just about what's written down on paper, right? Those are the formal rules, the laws, the regulations. But just as important are the informal rules. A place's culture, its social norms, the level of trust, the way things actually get done.
And that's the whole ballgame right there. You can have the most brilliantly written law, your formal rule, but if it completely goes against the local culture, the informal rules, it's just not going to work. The policies that actually succeed are the ones that manage to get both of those things pointing in the same direction.
So, after pointing out this massive gap, the study doesn't just leave us hanging. It actually pivots to the solution. It puts out a call to action for researchers to do better, to build a much stronger bridge between their science and the world of policy so their work can have a real positive impact.
And they lay out a pretty clear roadmap for what future research needs to do. First, it has to tackle those blind spots we saw, like making tourism way more inclusive and focusing on diversity. Second, it needs to help us get way better at handling crises and building resilience. Third, it has to dig into that messy, complex world of formal and informal rules. And finally, it needs to ask the tough questions about who benefits from a policy and when the timing is right. Basically, it's about making research more grounded in reality.
So what this all boils down to is a call for a fundamental shift in how research is done. It's about moving from simply identifying and describing problems to actually developing complete, evidence-based, and genuinely useful solutions that can help build a better, more sustainable tourism industry for everybody.
Which leaves us with one last kind of troubling question to chew on. This study shows us that there's this vast library of expert knowledge that's basically just sitting on the shelf, not being used. So if policymakers aren't getting their guidance from all this research, what, or maybe who, is guiding them instead? Something to think about.